Hello, I'm Dr. Jeff McQuillan from ESLPod.com. You're about to listen to a completely new way to improve your English from the most popular language podcast in the world. Over 1.27 million people have used our lessons to improve their English, and now you can too. Start right now. Enjoy. This is English as a Second Language Podcast English Cafe, episode 517. I'm your host, Dr. Jeff McQuillan, coming to you from the Center for Educational Development in beautiful Los Angeles, California. On this cafe, we're going to talk about the 1998 movie Die Hard with Bruce Willis. We're also going to talk about a famous American poet, a woman with a very interesting story by the name of Emma Lazarus. And as always, we'll answer a few of your questions. Let's get started. The movie Die Hard tells the story of a tough, strong New York City police officer by the name of John McClane. John McClane, who is played by the actor Bruce Willis in the movie, uses his skills as a policeman and his intelligence to outwit a criminal, a group of criminals, and to save innocent people. To outwit, O-U-T-W-I-T, someone, means to defeat someone in a contest or competition by being more intelligent, by being smarter than the other person. The movie begins with John McClane on an airplane. He is flying from New York to Los Angeles to visit his wife, Holly, and their children for Christmas in December. He and his wife are separated, meaning they no longer live together, but they're not legally divorced. McClane hopes his wife will give their marriage another try after this visit. To give something another try, T-R-Y, means to attempt to do something for a second time to see if it will work better or will be successful. McClane arrives at the airport, and when he does, there is someone waiting for him, a professional limousine driver. A limousine, L-I-M-O-U-S-I-N-E, is a large, very comfortable car that usually has a professional driver, sort of like a taxi cab. However, a limousine is more expensive and much nicer. This limousine driver takes McClane to the office building where his wife works here in Los Angeles. McClane gets out of the car and goes into the office building, and the driver goes down into the basement below the office building and sits in the car waiting for McClane to finish his visit so he can drive him to his next destination, to where he is going after that. So McClane enters into the building, and his wife, Holly, is there. Holly takes him to her office so that he can freshen up. To freshen, F-R-E-S-H-E-N, up, is a two-word phrasal verb that means to wash your face and hands, perhaps even to change your clothing after a long period of travel or of some other activity. I tend to think we use this phrasal verb to freshen up more with women than with men, but I guess we could say that John McClane went into Holly's office, his wife's office, to freshen up after this long plane ride from New York. Holly leaves her husband in her office and goes back to the Christmas party that her company is having. McClane says he will join her when he is finished freshening up. After Holly goes back to the party, however, a group of men arrive at the building. They enter with guns and kill the security guard, the man whose job is to keep people safe. One of the men stays at the desk and pretends to be the security guard. The rest of them go upstairs to the office party, and they take the entire group of people working hostage. A hostage, H-O-S-T-A-G-E, is a person who is held against his wishes, a person who is held as a prisoner until some sort of condition is met. When someone is taken as a hostage, often the person who is taking them as a hostage will demand money. I want $1 million, and when I get $1 million, I will give you your husband back or your child back. That is a hostage. Sometimes hostages are taken for political reasons. A political group might take someone hostage and demand certain changes in a government, for example. Well, Holly and her fellow employees are taken hostage. McClane, however, is still in Holly's office. He doesn't know what's going on, but he hears the noises and realizes that the building is being attacked. So he escapes, he leaves Holly's office and goes to an area of the building that is still under construction, meaning it's still being built. It's not yet finished. He pulls the fire alarm to try to call the police. A fire alarm is a loud siren or noise that goes off in a building, usually when a fire has started. If you pull the fire alarm, you turn it on, and so a noise is made, and in most cases, the fire department and or police are automatically called. Usually it's the fire department, of course. The police are told that there's a fire, and they call the building to see if a fire truck needs to be sent to help put the fire out. When the police call, however, the man pretending to be a security guard, one of the criminals, answers the phone and says, no, there's nothing wrong in the building. He tells the police not to come to the building. At this point, our hero, John McClane, realizes he will have to do something else to get the police to come to the building in order to save these hostages. The leader of the evil men is a German named Hans Gruber. It's interesting, as the movies and politics of the world change, the evil people in American movies change nationalities as well. For many years, it was a German person, then it could be perhaps a Russian, maybe now, I don't know, a Chinese. It depends on the political atmosphere of the period in which the movie is made. This movie was made in the late 1990s. Anyway, Hans Gruber knows that there is someone else in the building, someone who is not in the group of hostages that he has. So he sends his men to go and find this person. We also learn that Hans Gruber is really just a criminal. He is in the building to steal $640 million worth of a kind of investment called a bond. These bond certificates or pieces of paper are inside the building in something called a safe. A safe, S-A-F-E, is a strong, secure box or room where you keep valuable things, things that you don't want someone to steal. Most banks, for example, have a safe where you can perhaps put valuable objects that you own into a little box, what we call a safe deposit box. Well, this isn't a bank. This is a business that has a safe inside of the building. The owner of this building is a man by the name of Joe Takagi. Gruber wants Takagi to give him what we would call combination or numbers that would let him go into the safe. Of course, so Gruber can steal everything inside. Takagi refuses, and so Gruber kills Takagi. The building, by the way, is called the Takagi Building. Meanwhile, while this is going on, the men that Gruber sent to find John McClane are searching every floor, every level in order to find them. McClane, however, is waiting for them. He knows that they are going to come looking for him, and so he kills these men, or at least most of them. So what does Gruber do? He sends even more men to look for our hero, John McClane. McClane is eventually able to contact the police by using one of the radios that he gets from one of the men he has killed. He talks to a police officer by the name of Sergeant Al Powell. Powell arrives and looks at the building from the outside, and it seems that there is nothing wrong. So he's about to leave when McClane, realizing he has to do something else to get the police's attention, throws the body of one of the men he has killed onto Powell's police car. Well, of course, immediately, Powell understands that something serious is happening, and he calls for more support, more police officers. The movie continues, and Gruber and his men continue to try to find McClane and try to steal the money and objects that are inside of the safe. Will they be successful? Will they kill John McClane? Or will they be killed? Well, I'm not going to tell you the ending of the movie, but my guess is many of you have seen it. If you haven't, it's an exciting movie to watch, and you should try to find it somewhere, I think. I think you'll enjoy it. Now, John McClane, I mentioned earlier, was played by a famous actor, Bruce Willis, and the bad guy, Hans Gruber, is played by another famous actor, not a German, but a Brit, someone from Great Britain, an actor by the name of Alan Rickman, who was also in the Harry Potter movies. There's a famous and funny part of the movie where Gruber asks McClane who he is, and McClane refuses to give his name or tell him why he is in the building. So Gruber calls McClane Mr. Cowboy. A cowboy, C-O-W-B-O-Y, is a man who rides horses. Cowboys featured famously in many movies during the 20th century in what are called westerns, movies about the western part of the United States during the 19th century. In these westerns, cowboys are always tough. Cowboys are always, or typically, the heroes. One of the things that cowboys would say in these movies is an expression that just means I'm excited or let's go. The expression was yippee-ki-yay. Well, because Hans Gruber calls McClane cowboy, McLean, during one important scene or part of the movie, says to Gruber, "Yippee-ki-yay," and then calls Gruber a very vulgar name. The name has the word mother in it, as well as another word that begins with F that I won't repeat here on the podcast. But if you know something about English, you probably have heard what we call the F word. He uses this word, obviously, in an insulting way when he talks to Gruber. A lot of people wonder what yippee-ki-yay means. It's just an expression that doesn't have any meaning, at least in English, other than to say that you are excited or to say, let's go. No one uses it anymore in daily conversational English unless they're making a joke related to the Die Hard movie. It's only an expression you would hear in an old Western movie. Die Hard was immediately popular, not only in the United States, but all around the world. In fact, it was so popular, they made a couple more Die Hard movies. Die Hard 2 was released in 1990. Die Hard with a Vengeance was released in 1995. In 2005, Live Free or Die Hard was released. In 2013, there was A Good Day to Die Hard. And there is apparently one more movie, not yet released at the time I am recording this episode, in the summer of 2015, called Die Hardest. Even though the other movies have not been as popular as the original, people still love and know this character, John McClane, played by the actor Bruce Willis. From movies, we turn to poetry. The poet Emma Lazarus was born in New York in July of 1849. She was a Sephardic Jew. Sephardic, S-E-P-H-A-R-D-I-C, means that she was descended from the Jewish people who lived in Spain and Portugal in the late 16th century. When I say she was descended from, I mean she was a relative of. Her family many years ago, centuries ago, was from this particular group. She was raised in New York, and she had the opportunity when she was there during this time in the middle of the 19th century to study different languages and the literature of different languages. As a result, she grew up a very well-educated woman. This was somewhat unusual for women during this period of history. Lazarus began writing early in her life and published her first book in 1867 when she was only 18 years old. The book was called Poems and Translations and was very well received by newspapers and others who were educated. To be well received means it got a positive response from people, from those who read it. In fact, the famous American author, Ralph Waldo Emerson, liked Lazarus's poems and writing so much that he began telling other people about her work. As a way of thanking Emerson for his support, Lazarus dedicated her next book, Admetus and Other Poems, published in 1871, to Ralph Waldo Emerson. When I say she dedicated the book to him, I mean that she said that this particular book was done in his honor. You can dedicate your book to a certain important person in your life, or to someone you think had an influence on you, or was perhaps someone who had an influence on the topic you are writing about. When I published My first book, I dedicated it to my parents. That's a common dedication for books. Sometimes even movies and TV shows, when you watch them at the end, will show a person to whom that movie or show was dedicated. Over the next 10 years, Lazarus published 3 more books and had many of her poems published in magazines. Beginning in 1881, Emma Lazarus started to focus on the difficulties, the problems of the Jewish people in Europe and in the United States. At this time, during the late 19th century, many Jews were immigrating to the United States from Eastern Europe and Russia because of the persecution they experienced there. Persecution comes from the verb to persecute, P-E-R-S-E-C-U-T-E. To persecute someone means to treat someone very badly because of perhaps his or her race or political beliefs or religion. Unfortunately, some of the Jewish people who escaped persecution from Eastern Europe and Russia came to the United States and were not made to feel very welcome here either. Lazarus decided to write more about the persecution of Jews in Eastern Europe to try to make Americans understand the difficult situation these new immigrants had faced, had lived through. She also began working with Jewish immigrants arriving to the United States to try to help them adjust, to build new lives here. Lazarus was proud to be an American, so it is no surprise that when a group of people asked her to help raise money, to help get more money to build what we would call the base for the Statue of Liberty, she agreed. The Statue of Liberty, you may know, was a gift from the people of France to the United States. It is the famous structure in New York City with Lady Liberty holding up a torch, a lamp. In order to put the Statue of Liberty up in New York, they needed something to put it on. The base, B-A-S-E, is what the statue rests on. It's the thing you put the statue on. They needed a base, and in order to build the base, they needed money. France had paid for the building of the statue, but the people of New York had to build the base upon which to put it. Lazarus decided to write a poem to make some money to help pay for this base, and the poem was called The New Colossus. A colossus, C-O-L-O-S-S-U-S, is a statue of a person that is much larger than a real person. People liked Lazarus's poem so much that they decided to put it on the base of the Statue of Liberty after Lazarus died. The poem that Lazarus wrote is still one of the most famous poems known to at least some Americans. School children often learn the poem, or at least they used to. The poem contains the famous lines, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore." The poem is about welcoming people who have been persecuted in their home countries into the United States. The first line of the poem is, "Give me your tired, your poor." That's easy enough to understand. The second line is a little more difficult. It says, "Your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." To huddle, H-U-D-D-L-E, means to stand very close together, stand close to other people. A mass, M-A-S-S, is a large group of something. In this case, a large group of people. Now, why would people huddle next to each other? Why would they stand close to each other? Well, perhaps because they're scared, or maybe they're just cold. New York gets awfully cold in the wintertime. However, I think it's the first meaning there, that people perhaps are being persecuted and they're scared, and so they huddle together for safety. These masses huddling together were, according to Lazarus, yearning to breathe free. To yearn, Y-E-A-R-N, means to desire something strongly, to really want something. These people want to breathe free. They want to be free. The final line of this section of the poem says, "The wretched refuse of your teeming shore." The word wretched, W-R-E-T-C-H-E-D, means very unhappy or very unlucky. Refuse, R-E-F-U-S-E, basically means trash, something that you throw away. So the wretched refuse would be, I guess, the people from other countries who are unlucky and whose countries no longer want them or no longer seem to want them. The word teeming, T-E-E-M-I-N-G, is not a common word in English. It means to be full of something. A shore, S-H-O-R-E, is a piece of land next to the sea, next to a lake or another large body or area of water. So we have the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. You can imagine these people who are huddled next to each other in a large group, standing on the shore of another country, wanting to go to a different country. Sadly, a situation that we continue to see even in the 21st century. You can see how Lazarus, in writing these words, was in part expressing her thoughts, her opinions about welcoming the persecuted Jews from Europe who were then arriving to the United States. Because of what the Statue of Liberty represents to people coming to this country, the words of the poem are also very appropriate or suitable for other groups as well, and certainly appropriate for being placed on the base of the Statue of Liberty. Lazarus actually spent a couple of years in the 1880s traveling through Europe and learning more of the history of the Jews there. By the time she returned to New York, she was very sick, and she died in 1887. Emma Lazarus continues to be a well-known poet because of this poem, The New Colossus. In many ways, that is perhaps the best way to remember her as someone who cared deeply about the United States, who was proud to be an American, and who wanted to welcome those who were persecuted in other countries to this country. Now let's answer a few of your questions. Our first question comes from Iris, I-R-I-S, in China. The question has to do with three expressions or terms: in front of, ahead of, and before. All three of these have a similar meaning. Let's start with in front, F-R-O-N-T, of something. To be in front of means to be in a position just ahead of something else. So if I am standing in a line, in a queue, waiting for service at the bank, I have someone in front of me and I have someone behind me. The person in front of me will get service right before I get service. Ahead of, A-H-E-A-D-O-F, means the same as in front of and can usually be used in the same situations where you would use in front of. It can be used to describe someone's physical position. However, it can also be used to mean the same thing as the third term in this question, before. Ahead of can mean prior in time or before something happens. So you can talk about someone finishing his test ahead of the other students. He wasn't physically in front of the other students, but he finished his test before, in terms of time, the other students. The word before can actually mean either something related to time or to physical location, although usually we use it to mean something related to time. Before, when used to talk about in front of in location, often appears with the verb to stand. In somewhat more formal English, you can say, I stand before you. It's a somewhat poetic way of saying I'm standing in front of you, although the more normal meaning is I am here talking to you. For example, if you were in a courtroom before a judge, you were standing before the judge. I stand before you saying that I am innocent. It's a little more formal or perhaps a little bit more poetic way of expressing that idea. Our next question comes from Amaurus, A-M-A-U-R-S, in Cuba. Amaurus wants to know the meanings of three different phrases or expressions: as if, as though, and as for. The truth is we could spend an hour talking about these three expressions, but let me just give you the brief definitions and uses of each. As if means as would be the situation if, or as would be the case if. For example, my brother acted as if he were innocent. He isn't actually innocent, but he's pretending to be innocent. The use of the expression as if asks you to imagine a hypothetical situation, something that isn't true, or at least isn't true right now. As though, T-H-O-U-G-H, means the same as if. In most situations, you can use as though and as if interchangeably, one for the other. You might have noticed in my example for as if that I used the past tense, and not even a form of the past tense that you might associate with the example, which was with a third-person singular pronoun. The use of as if and as though is one of the few cases where something called the subjunctive mood is used in English and changes the form of the verb. However, in recent years, the use of the subjunctive in this case in English has become less and less popular. Nowadays, you will hear people say and write things such as if he was innocent, instead of as if he were innocent. You will also hear the present tense used with as if and as though. He acts as if he owns this room, instead of he acts as if he owned this room. As for has a completely different meaning than as if and as though. As for, F-O-R, simply means concerning or with regard to. It's a little more formal than saying regarding or concerning. For example, as for Sally, she decided to leave her job last year. As for there means in talking about or referring to Sally. You're telling the listener the topic of what your sentence is about. We probably would use this expression as for when we are talking about a number of different people or a number of different groups, and you want to make sure that the person listening to you understands the person to whom you are referring or about whom you are speaking. You can even use it for yourself. You could say, as for me, I don't want to go to the movie. You might say that if just previously you had been talking about other people wanting to go to a movie or your friends wanting to go to a movie. You're trying to say, well, in my case, as for me, I don't want to go to the movie. Notice that because for is a preposition, that the pronoun that comes after it is the object pronoun, me. You don't say as for I, you say as for me. You don't say as for he, you say as for him. It's the object of the preposition. Finally, Emil, I-M-I-L, in Colombia, wants to know the meaning of the expression to take stock. To take stock, S-T-O-C-K, means usually to think about a situation or an event carefully so that you can make a decision about what to do, to examine your own life or a certain situation in your life in order to make a decision or to form an opinion about something. Another meaning of to take stock is to make a list or to check a list of things that you own, especially if you have a store that sells things. If you have a store that sells shoes, every so often you would want to take stock of the shoes in your store. You'd want to go through and count the shoes to make sure that they're all there or that perhaps someone hasn't stolen some of them. But in normal conversation, we use this expression to take stock of something in a more general way, meaning to think about something carefully or examine something carefully. I need to take stock of my life. I need to figure out why I'm here on this earth and what I'm supposed to be doing. That's it. No tests, no exercises, no special software. Get what's worked for 1.27 million people in 189 countries. ESLPod.com. Log on to listen to the audio lessons and read the learning guides. We have over 1,500 lessons prepared by former university professors, taught by Dr. Jeff McQuillan, one of the most talked about and respected English teachers in the world. It's simple. It works. It's ESL Podcast.